are these people?
Friend of the show, Arturo Dominguez from Decolonized Journalism, had written, he's been on this Venezuelan migrant story. He's been all over ICE and Customs and Border Patrol and all that they've been up to since long before even Trump took office. And he's been growing his Substack presence, thankfully. We need more independence to grow. And he published this article, which is really good. Actually, I remember Dissent in Bloom a couple of weeks ago. We read an article, her talking about 287G, which is this law that allows ICE or Border Patrol to deputize American police forces or sheriff departments and make them part of their own force. And so Arturo has been compiling a list. He said, I analyzed the entire list of local and state agencies now participating in ICE's 287G program. Of the 1,154 agreements, Florida has the most with 334. Why am I not surprised? Texas has 220. Also not surprised. You've got very, Republican, MAGA-friendly governors there. The 287G program, again, deputizes members of local and state agencies to conduct immigration enforcement operations. So Arturo literally has this list, state by state, for posterity to maintain public access. He published this at the Antagonist magazine. So let's get to this list. And this literally goes state by state. And you can go right to your state right there if you want. All right. I'm proud to say that New Jersey has 0 agreements. So that's at least one little positive nugget that I pulled out of that. And this has gotten him some visibility. But like he says, under the authority of DHS, Immigration Customs Enforcement, and its Enforcement and Removal Operations Division, they utilize a program known as 287G under the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996. The act allows ICE to delegate to state and local law enforcement officers the authority to perform specified immigration officer functions under the agency's direction. Basically, they really want them to be able to assist in arrests, but also to potentially conduct their own arrests if they find something and there's no ICE around. Again, under the program, ICE trains and authorizes state and local law enforcement to conduct certain immigration enforcement functions, primarily by deputizing officers and granting them access to ICE databases, allowing them to issue detainers, and permitting them to execute administrative warrants. The program operates under different models. And this is important because there are 3 different models. You have first the jail enforcement model, which is designed to identify and process removable migrants with criminal or pending charges, all right, who are arrested by state or local law enforcement agencies, permitting them to interrogate inmates about their immigration status. This actually, I believe, was what had happened in the case of Anthony's sister-in-law, Natalia. Then there is the task force model, which serves as the force multiplier for law enforcement agencies to enforce limited immigration authority with ICE lurking nearby during their routine police duties. That's messed up. This type of enforcement often takes place during traffic stops, calls for emergency services, and even traffic accidents, which is unbelievable. You get into an accident and all of a sudden you're taken off by ICE. Police often call ICE when they suspect someone of being an undocumented immigrant, in many cases, racially profiling victims of crimes. What a surprise. And then you've got the Warrant Service Officer Program, which allows ICE to train, certify, and authorize state and local law enforcement officers to serve and execute administrative warrants on immigrants in their agency's jail. The warrants are typically administrative, not criminal or judicial, and are issued by supervisory agents within ICE and not even a judge. So that literally is just to serve papers. Okay. Welcome, Jen Budd, who's a former ICE, former Border Patrol, Customs and Border Patrol agent We read one of her articles last week on the show, so welcome. So getting back to Arturo, the program has been the subject of much scrutiny through the years due to Homeland Security abusing its surveillance powers against U.S. citizens, thus granting local and state police the same powers by granting them access to civilians' private data. That's not good. As of November 10th of this year, there are currently, again, 1,154 agreements in place with local and state agencies. 145 are jail enforcement, not good. I mean, they're all not good. 596 are task force, and 419 are warrant service officers. So those are the lion's shares, the latter two. Data provided by ICE, which is unbelievable that they even gave anything because they usually don't respond to any FOIA requests at all. All right. A ton of duplicate content was removed. He cleaned up the spreadsheet. This is an XLS format. That's Excel. Okay. And then it's searchable, of course. All right. And this should make the list easily searchable with Control F or Command F, depending on whether you're on Windows or Mac. So you can also Control F it in your just in your browser, because he listed it state by state. You can go down and let's just randomly, I'm looking at the state of Iowa. You've got two that are task force. All right. And you've got the Iowa Department of Public Safety and the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Those are big departments, again, that are now being tasked and trained and able to assist ICE in whatever they want, whatever they need help with, as long as they've gone through the training and deputization. So that was the first part of it. Was I wanted to mention that Arturo has collected this data. So if you want to look up your state and your county to see if your local sheriff is participating, you can do that. And I encourage everyone to do that. The links will be in the description on the Substack afterwards at indymediatoday.com. But then I also wanted to read this article that Arturo wrote the other day, and it ties into that 287G program where he's found that ICE is targeting migrant children using that 287G program. So again, using the broadly debunked pretext of hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied children being placed with unvetted sponsors, ICE is planning now to target children and now deport the kids. With their parents, I don't know. I hope so. Since the Trump administration took over in January, it has spent billions of dollars targeting migrants across the country for dubious reasons. Why? Because it's red meat for his base. While the White House continues to suggest it's targeting the worst of the worst criminal migrants, it swept thousands off the streets who had no prior criminal record. Again, why? Because there's a 3,000 arrest per day mandate. Additionally, the Department of Homeland Security and the agents under its purview have targeted migrant children because they can, oftentimes taking them from their parents as they're being detained or deported. Is this a trafficking thing? I'm not going to suggest it might be, but there are some that certainly would suggest so. On Friday, DHS's Office of Public Affairs announced a new initiative employing ICE, that 287G program, authorizing again local and state agencies to target unaccompanied migrant children that, quote, the Biden administration lost or placed with unvetted sponsors, unquote. What their definition of unvetted sponsor is a whole other story. The agency continues to use a broadly debunked narrative, and they're claiming that as many as 450,000 children were placed with unvetted sponsors and are now sex slaves or dead, quote unquote. Completely untrue. Typically, sponsors are family members and frequently foster families. So 450,000 foster sex slaves? Quote, this new law enforcement partnership, known as the Unaccompanied Children Safety Verification Initiative, represents ICE's commitment to protect vulnerable children from sexual abuse and exploitation through collaboration with 287G law enforcement partners. Yeah, sure, that's what it's about. Sure. The primary focus, because there is certainly an alternative focus, of this initiative is to conduct welfare checks on these children to ensure that they're safe and not being exploited, and certainly not housed with anyone that also might be here in the process of going through getting legal if they're not already, or here legally and able to work, like that teacher that we talked about last week, and we've got to follow up for her too. All right. However, the system, of course, is far from perfect. That's a nice understatement. In 2024, the OIG for Health and Human Services issued a report titled, quote, gaps in sponsor screening and follow-up raise safety concerns for unaccompanied children, unquote. That is red meat again for Republicans to be able to go after Democrats and say they didn't do the background checks, so now we're going to go and clean this up. The report highlighted persistent problems during a major influx concerning the screening of sponsors who apply to care for children, alongside issues regarding post-release follow-up. Yeah, well, when you starve the agency and you don't fund it properly, you're intending for there to be gaps so that you can then raise this kind of a concern later on. It literally is built into the entire program. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, or the ORR, which is a program office under the Administration for Children and Families under HHS, is tasked with the evaluations. Let's see how they're starving the ORR, shall we? The report made various recommendations to improve its process intended to safely release children to sponsors. What they want to do is get these kids out of detention and in with someone that claims to be a family member that's going to take care of them. The report indicated that ACF concurred with the following recommendations. And it must be in quotes, because the ACF, I'm likely guessing, did not actually really concur. There might have been a couple of people there that might have signed off on it, but I'm guessing that the general consensus would not feel this way, but I don't know. But the plan is to implement additional safeguards to ensure that all safety checks are conducted and documented as required prior to approving the release of a child to their sponsor. I think that's fair if you make the people available in a timely fashion to be able to make that happen and not drag their feet, which is what they're actually doing. They want to develop a reference guide to help case managers better evaluate sponsors' identity. Great idea. Take additional steps to ensure that mandatory home studies are conducted when required. Absolutely, when the agency is properly funded and they have the resources. They also want to provide additional guidance for case managers on when to consider recommending discretionary home studies. Again, these all sound reasonable, right? They want to ensure that sponsors' records in the UC portal accurately capture sponsorship history and information obtained after children's release regarding sponsors' suitability. We should be documenting if somebody isn't doing the right thing. 100%. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. And we need to develop an effective monitoring mechanism, because they don't have one, to identify children who don't receive timely follow-up calls after they're released to sponsors. But that's not what's happening here. Again, they need to develop that because it's not happening now. The analysis signals just how arduous the process can be during a major influx of migrant children, as seen in recent years. For example, the OIG's report found that despite HHS being required to make follow-up calls on 30 to 37 days after placement for every child and their sponsor, in many cases, the agency didn't follow up with the children. It did, and then it took an average of 122 days for a caseworker to reach out. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because the caseworkers don't give a shit? I genuinely don't. Of course, it's not. It's because there's a backlog that's literally starved 4x, 30 to 37 days to 122 days. That's because they don't have enough resources. Even so, there's no basis for the idea that the Biden administration lost or placed with unvetted sponsors almost 500,000 kids, a point that senior fellow at the American Immigration Council, Aaron Reichenmelnick, who's one of the best immigration journalists out there, pointed out on X. He's also a lawyer, right? Their suggestion that over 450,000 children were placed with sponsors who were child predators or criminals is a bald-faced lie. Did it happen in some cases? Just as it happened under Trump 1.0 and under Obama, given the challenges of screening? Yes. Was it 450,000? Absolutely not. So he drills down a little further, quote, the law requires that unaccompanied children be sent from the border to shelters within 72 hours, but shelters have limited capacity, so there's pressure to release them to sponsors. Both Democrat and Republican administrations have struggled with how to balance this pressure with adequate vetting. Yeah, you don't have the facilities. These facilities, of course, again, are also privately owned in a lot of cases, like Geo Group and Core Civic own the facilities. So it's costing the federal government a ton of money to deal with all of this. And a family member steps up and says, yeah, I'm a cousin, I'm an uncle, I'll watch out for this kid, and I'll make sure that they come back. Put yourself into the system and get yourself tracked and make sure that the kid shows up and that all the visits are done. What we're seeing here again is that there is a backlog that we need 4 times as much coverage as we currently have just to be able to get even, let alone get ahead of the problem. Earlier this year, reports began to surface on ICE checking on migrant children released to sponsors, exposing them to their parents, who are often immigrants. Agents would then detain the parents, separate the families, and in many cases, deport them separately. It's so fucked up. Months later, the White House moved to detain migrant children indefinitely, a direct violation of the Flores Settlement Agreement, which dictates how migrant children should be treated, which is that if they have parents that they can be deported with, they need to stay with the parents. I remember the first Trump administration, them breaking up families and everybody freaking out about it. And it's terrible. It shouldn't happen. Family separations have not become the flashpoint they once were. Oh, thank you, Arturo. Still, they are certainly happening as many families have been separated and deported separately, leaving parents to wonder where their kids might be and leading to Latin American leaders like Maduro to declare that the U.S. is kidnapping children, while they declare that he's a terrorist in return. What started as targeting entire migrant families and deporting them together has become a new family separation policy. Again, the cruelty is part of the point. They're awful, awful people. They really are. Trump administration. I hate to say it. All right, Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon. It's racist as shit, and I'll call it for what it is. The new DHS policy only promises to exacerbate the issue. Great. Quote, we've jump-started our efforts to rescue children who were victims of sex and labor trafficking by working with our state and local law enforcement partners to locate these children, said Tricia McLaughlin, who works for DHS. She's a monster. She's one of these spokesweasels that stands up and says the most awful shit with a straight face, and then afterwards, like the douchebag with the punchable face that worked for the Biden administration, then runs around and says, well, look, I didn't really believe that, but that was my job to say, so I was going to say it. Because he's an asshole. So, and of course, now we're dropping frames because I'm talking about Biden and Trump and all them. Anyway, it should be noted that following the 2024 OIG report, that the Biden admin said that it began to the process of improving the system through training, monitoring, technology, and evaluation. That means not at all. Remember who was in charge of the border? It was your vice president. Oh my God, what a train wreck. Support Arturo and support independent media and support journalism like this, because you're not getting this on corporate media, not like this, not unless it suits their narrative to fearmonger about Trump. It might in this case, but the targeting of migrant children is not really a juicy story for corporate media, because Democrats were doing it too. So you don't really have the, oh my God, Trump is blah, blah, blah. I mean, they do that to a point, but again, it was already happening under Democrats. So corporate media ignores it. And so support journalists like Arturo. I'm actually a paid subscriber annually to Decolonized Journalism, which is Arturo's Substack. And it's extremearturo.substack.com. Again, go to Indie Media today after the show is over, and I'll have all the links to every article and every video that I run during the show. A follow-up story. We did talk about that nursery school teacher, that pre-K teacher that was arrested by ICE and dragged out of her school in front of everyone and arrested and sent to Broadview ICE facility. Well, Diana Santillana, the beloved Raito del Sol daycare teacher arrested with children present, was freed after a federal judge ruled her mandatory detention was illegal. She'll be back teaching soon. Good for her. Good for her. I'm glad she decided to go back, because that would scare the shit out of me, I'd tell you right now. That was story number one, where we talked about ICE and a couple things that's going on. Again, are they now separating families? Are they now going after kids with 287G that have sponsors because they understaffed the agency, couldn't meet the deadlines for the sponsor visits and the checks? So now they're going to go and just sweep and deport everyone? Thanks. Yeah, that's a good idea. Support the media you want to see. Support independent media. The ways to do that here are Cash App, $ Indie News Network. Thank you, Ralph. I just got an alert from Ralph. Ralph is one of the people highlighted because he's one of the super supporters, so thank you. Ko-fi.com/Indie News Network will pop something up on screen during the live stream. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. Again, IndieNewsNow.com. There's a tab to keep the media free, and you can support right there and tip us with a Stripe link. And then over at IndieMediaToday.com, we're live over on Substack right now. So glad that they decided to turn on live streaming. It's great. And then INNNewsletter.com. Sorry, I'm going to take a drink. So INNNewsletter.com. We go live a couple nights a week there, and we do a weekly update with everybody's links to all the different live streams, articles, and clips that are published throughout the week across the network. See you next Tuesday. So support independent media. Like I said, we need it more than ever. I'll see you next week, and I love you all, fam. Have a good night. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want?